Hello, good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone, and welcome to today's webinar episode on databases and building a product roadmap. Super excited and thankful to see some familiar names in the chat and really appreciate all of you here today taking time during what is always a very busy season to be here and learn about Notion. If you've been to our Notion Basics webinar before, we did one on building a team page. Today will feel like a really natural extension of that knowledge. And if this is your first webinar with me, doubly welcome. Really glad to have you here. I always love to have an active chat in these sessions, so feel free to say hi. Some of you already are, which is great. Let us know where you're joining from and let me know what you're hoping to get out of this session. I will try to do what I can to meet those specific needs. And while you all do that, I will quickly introduce myself. My name is Zoe Ludwig, and I run the user education programming here at Notion. I've been using Notion for a few years, both on Teams and as a personal user, and I'm just a big fan of the tool in general. I still discover new features every day and learn new ways to use it, and so I'm really excited to share some of those things with you today. And I'm joined in the chat by the lovely Elia, who is one of our super knowledgeable customer success managers, and she's here to help answer questions and post resources as needed. So today we are going to get a little bit technical. We're going to start with a very bite-sized lesson on the history of databases and talk about why they're so important to computing as we know it today. This is one of those things that's important to Notion's mission, and I think it really helps people understand how to get the most out of the tool. After that, we'll jump into learning about tables, properties, templates, views, relationships, rollups, and formulas. It's going to be a jam-packed webinar. So like I said, I will do my best to answer questions, but really ask folks to make use of the questions tab, which is right next to this chat that you've already found, if you have something you really want me to answer. That way other folks can upvote your questions and I can get to them in order of upvotes. If there's something I can't answer there, I'll definitely make sure to follow up after the webinar as well. So for the best experience today, make sure you're signed up for Notion. Ideally, you're here because you have an understanding of some of the basic features in Notion and you're looking to go a little bit deeper. But if you're feeling stuck, questions chat is there, and the Help Center is a really great resource on some of those more basic elements. Also, I fundamentally believe that learning is the stickiest when you are an active participant in it. So I'm going to encourage you to create a roadmap alongside me today, and you can focus on ways that you can customize it for your team. All right, that is all. So let's go ahead and dig in, starting with history class. So when we talk about our concept of blocks, we always say that we didn't invent the idea. And of course, the same is true of databases. Understanding this history gives us the opportunity to learn from the creators of computing and apply the thought in their most sincere form. So the relational model of databases that we're going to be playing around with today was invented sometime in the 1970s, and it's generally credited to IBM computer scientist Edgar F. Codd. Over the years, his ideas evolved through different models of computing, including Alan Kay's work on object-oriented programming, which powers the majority of the internet today. The basic idea here is that each piece of data is an object, and then it has associated properties. And the classic example of object-oriented programming starts with a car object, and then it has properties like the make, the model, and the color. There's a really good Netflix special on this under the Explain series if you're ever interested or have some spare time and want to learn more. But I'll talk about how that works in Notion. So in Notion, you're using a graphical user interface to interact with this data, to create objects and their associated properties. This follows that thesis that users are not looking at the underlying computer science, but they're able to work at a high level, but take advantage of those concepts. In practice, this looks like a Notion table where each row is an object and it has a bunch of associated properties. So we'll talk about that today. I just wanted to start there because I think it really nicely frames all of the work that we're going to do. So short history lesson. Let's jump into our roadmap. So like I said, building a roadmap today and using it to understand different views and properties that exist within databases. Go ahead, open your Notion app, build along with me, and let's start by adding a new Workspace page. To do that, I'm just going to click on this plus button and add it here. I'm adding this to the Workspace because I want everyone on my team to have visibility to this roadmap, and I want them to remember that it's there. This is a good rule of thumb for what belongs on a top level page. It's super important, it's frequently visited, and it's usable by everyone: marketing, engineering, sales, you name it. So we'll go ahead and give this a name, product roadmap, and we can give it a cute little icon. We'll go for the car for obvious reasons. So there's no default database type in Notion, but the table is the most traditional view of visualizing your data. So we'll go ahead and click on this table button, and that will turn our page into a full page table. In this view, it's easy to begin adding rows and columns and organizing those rows with tags and so on. By default, the table is going to include these 3 empty rows and then the tags property, which we'll talk about. So each row here is an object. So thinking back to OOP, it unlocked the ability to store data associated with an object rather than having these independent bits of data floating around on your computer. So while that might not sound super profound, it's really important to how we're going to interact with this data today. So here, the idea is that each row is going to be an item in our roadmap, a bug, a task, or an epic that our product team is going to complete sometime, likely in the new year. And then each one of these columns, right now just tags, and then the more that we will add, is a piece of data that is associated with that bug, task, or epic. So rather than having these individual bits of data floating around, we have a nice picture of what's going on with that project. And each of these rows can open to its own page where we can really visualize that, the name, the tags, and we could add additional information about that project as well. So again, for our database, each row will represent the work of one roadmap item. This is useful not only for engineers, but also for product people, for salespeople who are communicating these features out to clients, for marketing teams who are preparing their social media calendar, whatever it is, this is helpful to keep your whole team on the same page. So to start, we're going to add some fictitious but plausible tasks before adding properties. So we'll go ahead and start with adding improve pie chart coloring, and then add language support for Japanese, and then improve login with Facebook experience. Again, just random sample tasks. This is where you could start thinking through your roadmap to add the correct bugs, tasks, or epics that are top of mind for your team. Next, we'll want to associate these tasks with different properties. That helps us to make sense of what we're looking at. You can imagine that this list would grow to have way more items on it, and these tags will help us to be more organized. So here, we could rename this column to maybe the type, and we'll indicate which ones are tasks, which ones are bugs, and which ones are epics. So this is probably a task. Adding language support is a huge thing, so we'll call this an epic. And then improving the login experience is probably just a bug. Great. So you can add any other kind of property that you can think of by clicking on this plus sign, and then you'll get this pop-up menu. The important thing to remember here is that you need to denote a property type before adding information to a column. So that will come in handy later when we start to manipulate this information into different views. So to start, let's simply add a couple properties here. So we'll start with status. And for status, I'm going to use a single select property. So it allows me to select one item from a list of options. And I'll give it that name, status. And then I can start adding, let's see, in progress. Ooh. Not started, and not started. I might also want to add a deadline. So I'll go here again, give it the name deadline, and select the property type date. Fill that out in a little bit. I might want to add the person responsible for driving this product. So I'll say person responsible, give it the property type of person. And then maybe I'll add a couple of auto calculating properties. So these are going to be under the advanced section, and they just pull the metadata on these rows. So created by, for example, is going to tell me who created this row. And then created time will tell me when that row was created. And again, this is just helpful once you have that bigger data set so that you can go back and kind of think through, okay, that's been on our roadmap for years. We've never gotten around to it. Let's talk about why that is. Or on the other side, this just got added, but it's really important. It kind of just helps to frame everything here. Once we have all of our properties, we can further customize what's in these columns. So for example, with deadline, maybe I have add language support for Japanese coming at the end of February. Or maybe I want to set a date range where this project is going to happen or going to ship. If that works better for you and your team, that's great. So what we can do here is come in and format the date and include an end date. We'll just toggle that on. And then, for example, maybe improve pie chart coloring is a project that's happening January 3rd. Oof, live demos, you love to see it. Sorry, January 3rd to January 7th, right? And then I can see that date range populate on my table. So I mentioned that we can sort and filter information based on properties. That functionality exists on the top right-hand side of your table. And for both filtering and sorting, you'll need to select a property to operate on and then tell Notion what to do with that property. So we'll walk through an example where we sort by deadline. I'll go ahead and click Add a Sort. Select the property that I want to sort on, which in this case is deadline. And then I could select ascending or descending to see these tasks in order. I probably want the most urgent task first. So I'll go like this. And then if I were to add a date to this one, it would rearrange the sort accordingly. Similarly, if we wanted to add a filter, we follow the same process of selecting that item, clicking add a filter, selecting the property that we want to filter on. So maybe we just want to see the bugs. We'll do type. And our filter is where type contains bug. Right, so now we have a view where we are only seeing bugs and we're seeing them in order of when they will ship. If I had another item here, like maybe improve text sizing options, and I were to give it a different deadline, you would see that it's sorted in order. Again. All right. Again, you can imagine that these get really, really complex. You can add filters and sorts that are much more dynamic. So I could see all of the items that are coming out in the next week, in the next month, etc. That's probably more familiar to apps that you are used to using. So I won't dig too much more into these, but if you have additional questions, again, please feel free to make use of that questions tab or drop them in the chat. So before moving on to views, I'm going to go ahead and remove these filters and these sorts so we can see all of our items here. I'll just do that by clicking remove and clicking this little X here. And I want to add some additional details into these tasks and these bugs, right? So I mentioned that when you open up a row, you get this page. It has all of the information, all of those properties that are associated with the row, and it has this blank space where you can add additional information just like any other Notion page. So here's an example of a completed bug report, right? There's additional properties that you could add with your team. And then there is what the person who adds the bug fills out: description, steps to reproduce, recommendations, all of that. Now, to have a consistent experience, you probably want everyone on your team to be adding bugs and reporting bugs in the same way every time that they add them. And to do that, we're going to make use of database templates. So to add a template, lots of ways to do it, but we'll come up here to this three-dot menu, click on templates, and then click new template. And what this does is it creates a template. See how many times I can say that word in a minute, that you can use on any new database row. So we'll call this one new bug. We'll make sure to give it the type of bug. And then we can probably leave all of the other information empty because that will be dependent on the bug. But then we'll want to go ahead and add the top level topics that we want folks on our team to fill out. So we have description, steps to reproduce, and recommendations, right? If I wanted to, I could add bullet points in here. And I'm just using Markdown to format this. You can also use the plus button to get new blocks or the slash command, but I like typing in Markdown. Great. So then once we click out of this, we have our new bug template created. And if someone were to be, for example, reporting this bug, rather than just guessing what to add to the roadmap, they could click on this new bug template, and then they would be prompted with the correct things to add. We can do the exact same thing for tasks. So I'll show another finished example of a template here. So for improved pie chart coloring, your template for tasks might be a lot more filled out than your template for bugs, right? This is something that is going to require a little more thought. It's not just an afternoon of fixing. It requires design, all of those things. So in here, we've got problem statement, Figma mockups, proposed work, all of these things. So I'm actually just going to copy and paste this so you don't have to watch me type. But then I'll come back to my product roadmap and we'll follow that same flow, clicking that three-dot menu, templates, adding a new template that we'll call a new task, giving it the type of task, and then I will just paste this in here. And you can start to see how this might be helpful. So I'll delete that sample information. But this is cool. It also shows off like you can embed stuff in Notion. Probably most of you already know that, but if your team uses Figma or some other tool that you like to do your planning with, you can embed that right here. So Notion can kind of act as like the central source of truth for all of your documents related to that task or project. So again, I'll click out of that. And then if I open Improve Pie Chart Coloring, it's blank right now, but I can just click that new task template and it all shows up here. And then again, when I add more tasks, I'll follow that same template, which just helps to create consistency across my organization. All right. How are we doing, chat? Just need a sip of water there. Great. Next thing I want to talk about here is views and best practices. So now that we have this roadmap populated with tasks, properties, tags, statuses, all of these things, I'll go ahead and add person responsible actually while we're catching up. If you're building along with me, a great time to just go ahead and fill those things out. Great. So we have this all filled out. Let's talk about views. Since this is a database and not just a table, that data can be organized and viewed in lots of different ways. That's why I spent so much time talking about object-oriented programming at the beginning, because it really powers all of the really cool stuff that you can do with databases. So to add a view, you just click this Add a View button. I'm going to go through each one and talk a little bit about how you might use them in a product roadmap use case. Starting with a board view. So this view groups your items by any property, usually a tag or a person, but you could do it with any property. And you can change that using the Group By menu on the right-hand side. So to create it, I just click on that item, click Create. And then you'll see that by default, it went ahead and grouped by status. If I wanted to change what it was grouped by, I could just click on Group. And then instead of hitting status, I could say Group By, person responsible. And then each person can see the bugs, tasks, and epics that they are responsible for implementing. This probably looks familiar if you've used other project management apps like Jira or anything like that. And again, this is cool because what we have now is not just this Kanban board, but we also have this view where we can, look at everything all at once. Same data powers it all. You don't need to update it in multiple places. Next view we could explore is timeline view. So again, I'll come in here, add a view. Timeline view is great for, like it says, project scheduling and planning. This allows you to visualize your data on a timeline. So if you have, for example, date ranges where you think something might take a week to complete, you can view it here. And if you're trying to roadmap for the whole year or the quarter, you can just kind of add things and drag and drop them out here. I added some fake dates, but maybe this one is ongoing and I can visualize it on my timeline. I can also choose to timeline by different increments like quarter or year if you're doing big picture planning like many of you probably are right now for 2022. Similarly, if I wanted to view additional information here, like the person responsible, to make sure everyone on my team has an even workload, I can click on properties here. And then I can toggle on the properties that I want to see. So show in timeline, person responsible, and then I can see the avatar for the person responsible for completing each thing. Again, if you're like a manager and you're trying to map out your entire team's work, this is probably a really helpful view for you. Another date-based option is the calendar view. This one's pretty self-explanatory, but it takes, again, that same underlying data, displays it in a new way that you can customize however you want. So we've got some of our items on here, and I can use all of those same tools to customize this view. So property, I can see status, type, and person responsible, and then they show up right here. I could filter, I could sort, I can do any of those same items on a new view. The other two view options that we have available to use are list and gallery. I don't want to go too much into these. A list is basically a very simplified version of your table. If you were showing this to maybe like a third-party client and you didn't want to disclose the details of when things were coming or anything like that, you could just give them this view. And this is a great way to just see like one thing at a time. Same thing works here. Toggle off the properties. Maybe you want to toggle on the deadlines, but again, really simplified 10,000 foot view. And then a gallery view is the last one. This is like basically the opposite of a list. It lets you see tons of details about the project, which is like the card inside. And here you could see description, steps, reproduce, recommendations, the things that we added to those pages in the gallery view. Again, for road mapping, you're probably going to stick to board, timeline, calendar, and default view. But again, all of these options exist. All of it's powered by that data, and it's really easy to create and manipulate these views for whatever use case you have. And yeah, I see Sandra, it works well for design. Yes, if you are a designer and you want to like visually display maybe mocks or whatever, gallery view is a great option for you. Alrighty. I am gonna wait to do questions till the end, but I do want to just plug if you have a question about something I've covered so far, if you want to apply this to your team, but you're not sure how, please drop that in the questions chat. I want to go through two more quick things before I get into those. But thank you so much for sticking with me this far. This is a fun one. So we're going to get into relations and rollups, which is some of those advanced properties of what you can do with the database. They're like special superpowers that allow you to get really complicated with your Notion setup. Once you understand formulas, that's like the final boss, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So relations allow you to associate data in one table with data in another. Again, say that again. Associate data in one table with data in another. Examples of where this might be used include connecting a database of restaurants with a database of neighborhoods so that you can see which restaurants are in which neighborhoods. Or connecting a database of tasks with a database of projects so that you can see different views in different databases. Or connecting a database of candidates with a database of interviewers to keep track of who is interviewing whom. In our case, we're going to connect our product roadmap to our meeting notes database so that we can easily see what meetings are happening for which items on our product roadmap. So to create a relation, we go back to this plus sign button. We'll call this meetings associated. And we're going to scroll down into that advanced property type section and create a relation. When you do this, you'll be prompted to select the database that you want to relate. And in this case, I know I want to relate my meeting notes database. So now what's happened is, I'm going to drag this over so we can see it a little bit better, is I can grab data from my meeting notes database and display it right here on my product roadmap. So maybe there's a sprint planning that included improving pie chart coloring. I could see that here. And now when I open the page, it's there. I can also now click into this and view those meeting notes and get a better idea of what's going on with the project. And so you can imagine that as you're having meeting after meeting for some of these bigger epics, like adding language support, this starts to build out a really full picture of what's going on with that project. How long have people been meeting? What kinds of meetings are happening? All of those sorts of things. And definitely helps create visibility across your entire organization. The twin sister, if you will, to relationships is called roll-ups. Roll-ups allow you to analyze relationships. And there's a lot of things that you can do with them. They're exceptionally helpful if your relationship involves numbers. Going back to the restaurants and neighborhoods example, you could imagine that there might be a chain restaurant associated with multiple neighborhoods, and you could use a roll-up to count the number of neighborhoods that that restaurant exists in, or something like that. In our example of meeting notes and a roadmap, maybe you want to get an idea of how long folks have been talking about a certain project. So you could create a roll up with the date range function to do so. So again, this flow looks exactly the same as everything else. We're adding a new property, calling it uh, meeting range, and going at the type, the type of roll up. And then I'll need to go in here and actually configure my roll up using this little pencil editor. This rollup is associated with my meeting notes database and the date property on that meeting notes database. And I want to see the earliest date. So, oh, I'm willing to bet that this doesn't have a date on it. Live demo is always fun. So let's say Sprint 28 planning happened on December 20th. Now in my rollups column, what I see is that 2 days ago is when the first meeting for this project happened. This would be helpful, again, if you're looking at a whole list of projects and you're seeing some that aren't completed, but also no one's met about them in several weeks. That's a great place for a manager or a product lead to flag, like, this is stalled, what's going on? And again, everything in Notion is about customizing it to make it work for you. So if this isn't helpful, that's okay. You could create, a status column or what have you. That works better for you, but this is just a way to auto calculate and automate some of that work. Alrighty. So we have about 15 minutes left. I'm only seeing a few questions in the chat, so I'm just going to quickly show the last item with databases, which is formulas. Formulas, there are entire courses on creating Notion formulas, and it does get into like the code side of this no code tool a little bit heavier. But I do just want to show like the power of these formulas, and I'll do that with this tweet. So formulas let you calculate things using the properties that are in your database. So let's see. Doing some screen shuffling here. This is an example that I love from one of our ambassadors who built a formula that as you type the word Mario, it actually animates all of these colored cells and shows Mario walking in like Mario World. I just show this to show that formulas are incredibly complex and incredibly powerful if you really take the time to understand them. Back to our example, we're not going to build Mario because A, I don't know if I know how, and B, it would take a lot longer than we have time for right now. But what we are going to do is create a really simple formula that shows whether or not a project is overdue based on this deadline property. So we'll come in here, create a new thing called is overdue question mark. and give it the property type of formula. Just like with our rollups, we'll need to configure the formula here. So we can do that by clicking Edit Formula. And to return whether or not it's overdue, we need 3 things. So we'll do this using an if statement and then comparing the automatically calculated now value to our deadline property. So this if statement needs 3 arguments. First is the comparison. So we need to tell it to check if the current date time is before the deadline or after it. Then it needs the values to conditionally return if the statement is true or if it is false. So in this case, we can start by typing if, and then we're giving it that value of now. And we're saying if now is greater than the property deadline, we want it to return overdue. And if it's not, we want it to return not overdue. Now, if I type this in correctly, what should happen is an automatic calculation based on my deadline. So this one was due on December 8th. December 8th has passed, so this is overdue. January 6th has not passed, so this is not overdue. I see that was fast. It was fast. Like I said, formulas are really complicated, and I could spend a lot more time explaining this. But basically what we did is we used the conditional if statement, which if you're familiar with like any kind of coding or in Excel, this is a thing. Use a conditional if statement, set the condition. So if now is greater than the deadline, and then we gave it the things to return. So if this is true, return overdue. If it's not true, return not overdue. I could spend more time on formulas. I think what I would recommend if you're really interested in formulas is Red Gregory has a great course that they just released on YouTube, and I would go check that out. I will drop the formula in the chat so that if you want to try this on your own, you can just copy paste and kind of play around with it. Oh, Elliot's got me. Great job. All right. That concludes my very long demo of everything database related. Going to go ahead and get into questions. Thank you so much for sticking with me here. And please make sure to get those questions in and upvote so that I can make sure you all get what you came here for today. Let's see. Seeing this first one, can you show us again how you copied a template and then deleted the information that came over with it? Yes, definitely. So to create a new template, you're going to go to this 3-dot menu and click templates and then create a new template. Again, give it a name. We'll call this, I think the only one we haven't done is epic. The type of epic. Could probably give it the status of not started. It's pretty safe to assume the project won't have been started when you're creating the database row. And then your question was how you copied it in. I just copy pasted, so like Command V, but maybe I would have like project overview here, and then like team members or whatever. And then this automatically saves. So when I click out of it, I can open this guy up and add my new epic template. Hopefully that is helpful. All right. Thank you, Elliot, for answering this one. So relations are a tad bit complicated. Yes, I agree. What about synced databases? Can they stay synced but use different views? So I think, as Elliot said, you're talking about linked databases here. So this is the original copy of my database product roadmap. But if I wanted to display this in different places, for example, maybe on the design homepage, I could come in here and I could create a linked database view that just shows the tasks that have designers associated with them. So to do that, oh, I'm not seeing my mouse for whatever reason. Oh, probably because there's already a product roadmap in here. Anyways, to do that, I could create a new linked database on this page. And then I really don't know why it's not letting me click in here. Sorry about that. We'll do it on the design wiki. To do that, I'll just use my / command and then start typing link and create a linked database. Then I will select the database that I want. Got quite a few in this demo space. And then what I could do here is I could again like add a filter. Maybe I would have a property in this case called team, and I would just want to filter by design. Um, since I don't have that, maybe it's my design team is one person, and maybe it's if the design contains, or sorry, if the person contains David Apple, show it here. And so that's the only one that my designer is responsible for example. So same database, same underlying data. This is just a new instance of it, displaying that data in a different place and in a different way. So if you make a change here, it will reflect on your original product roadmap and vice versa. Okay. Relations between pages and roll-ups are the most useful for question mark. Yeah, uh, they're useful for a lot of things. I generally would use a relation anytime you have two relatively complex data systems and you don't want to show all of the information in both places, but you want to create that relationship. So, for example, my meeting notes database has date of the meeting, participants of the meeting, type of meeting, all of this additional information that isn't relevant to a project in my product roadmap. However, this one meeting in and of itself does relate to that project. So while I don't want to have a participant's property on my product roadmap, I do want to associate this in some way with that project. So that's a good way to use a relation. Um, Hopefully that's helpful. Rollups then are going to help you kind of analyze what's going on in that overlap property. So with the participants example, I could create a rollup that showed how many people have been at these different meetings, and that might help me get a sense of like how large the project is. Okay. Okay, Kate said when you copied over an existing template, it had info in it. I just deleted it. I didn't do anything special. I just like selected and backspaced it. I probably did it kind of quick, but it wasn't like any secret key, although that would be a cool product feature for sure. All right. Is it possible to set a recurring set of tasks that you can assign as a standard whenever you add a new project or task? I'm thinking a set of actions for every new YouTube video proposal. Yeah, definitely. I would do this using a template. So there's a couple ways that you could do this if you were had a sorry, if you had a database where every row was a video, you could use the properties as different checklist items and you could actually add there's a property type called checkbox. So maybe it's like shipped question mark. And this is just like the final like yes, it's shipped, right? You could do that with different checklist items in your YouTube upload flow or in your templates you could create a framework that you want everyone to follow, and you could create that list here. So, for example, publishing steps, uh, it MP4 file, and then create a name, et cetera, et cetera. The rule of thumb that I would say here is like include it as properties if you think that there is going to be some help in being able to sort or filter based on those items. Include it here if it's just like extraneous information that you want to keep in a more casual format. In this case, I would probably recommend putting these things as properties because then you could easily filter by, videos that haven't been named and you could just go through and name all of the videos that are in that category. Um, yeah, again, hopefully that answers the question. Uh, The other thing you could do here is create like a template button inside of your template, which is getting really complicated. But a template button lets you create a like smaller version of our database templates within the larger system. So the basic example is just adding a new to do. Every time I click this button, I'm just going to get a checkbox. And if you had a task that needs to be repeated multiple times during a project, like maybe a GitHub pull request sequence, you could pre-populate this template button and then just keep adding it every time you do that pull request. Um, Please ask more questions on that if you have them, because I think that's a great thing to get into here. Okay. All right. I'm gonna go back over to the chat. I've just been in that questions tab. You mentioned a YouTube series for formulas. Yes, that was Red Gregory's YouTube series. Can we sync a Google or Apple Calendar for the basic meeting info and take meeting minutes on Notion? Yeah, the best way to do this would be by using an integrator service like Zapier or Automate. And so the way that those work is basically you have some trigger in your Google Calendar that creates a new row in your Notion database. So you could set it up like every time a new meeting is added to your calendar, create a new row in your database, and then that could auto pull in like the time, the name of the meeting, and all of that information. Can we make a chart with the hours of the team? For example, burn down chart. Yes, I don't know what a burn down chart is, so I apologize for that. But making a chart with the hours of the team seems feasible. If you had, for example, another database where you were keeping track of the hours worked and you associated all of those here, you could do a roll up to roll up, sorry, to roll up all of that information into one place and see how many hours each person had worked on that project. Again, hopefully that's getting at what you wanted there. Great. Cool. Well, I will stick around for about 30 more seconds and see if any additional questions come in. While we're doing that, again, I just want to say thank you all for joining during this time of year. If you're looking for more inspiration on what databases can be used for, there's a couple things I'd recommend. First is templates in this bottom left corner is going to give you a lot of pre-created databases and systems built by the Notion team and by members of our community that will help get you started in framing workflows for your team. So we built a roadmap today, but there is actually a roadmap template that has a lot of the same information in it. So you could start here, bring this into your workspace, and then start to customize it using everything you learned today about properties, relations, and rollups. There's also a ton of inspiration content for databases on notion.so/guides. So I would definitely check that out if you're thinking about implementing new systems for your team in the new year. And then finally, if you have questions, this question mark button in the bottom right-hand corner is going to connect you to all the resources you need, our help and support guide, our support team, and also our Twitter if you want to follow us there. Great. Thank you again, everyone, for your time today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And if you're taking time off in the next few weeks, a very restful start before the new year. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and goodbye.